We start in Morocco, where many people have spent a second night sleeping on the streets after the country's deadliest earthquake in more than a half-century. Rescuers are still searching among the collapsed buildings. One survivor was pulled from the debris, giving helpers a brief moment to celebrate. Elsewhere, people have been burying the dead. More than 2,000 people are now known to have died after the magnitude 6.8 quake struck in the high Atlas Mountains southwest of the city of Marrakesh. King Mohammed has declared 3 days of national mourning.
As the death toll rises, a frantic search for survivors is now underway in towns and villages across Morocco's high Atlas Mountains. The magnitude 6.8 quake is the strongest to hit the region in more than a century.
We were sitting comfortably at home when suddenly we felt a tremor. That's my home right there. We could hear rocks falling and people screaming. We didn't know what was happening. We thought it was the apocalypse.
The quake hit remote villages and densely populated tourist areas alike. This CCTV footage of patrons in a Marrakesh restaurant 80 kilometers from the epicenter captures the moment the earthquake hit just after 11 p.m. on Friday. It caused widespread panic and chaos in the historic city and terrified residents to flee their homes.
I'm devastated. My home has been destroyed. Thank God we are still alive, but this is all very hard.
The city's Medina, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, turned into an open-air sleeping space for locals and tourists, either fearful of aftershocks or because they no longer have a place to return to. Volunteers and aid groups, both local and international, are mobilizing to support the victims of the earthquake. France, a former colonial power in Morocco, was among the first, offering to send firefighters to help with rescue efforts. Several countries are also pledging financial assistance. And Algeria, which suspended diplomatic ties with its neighbor 2 years ago, said it would open its airspace for aid flights to Morocco.
Let's cross over to Marrakesh and our correspondent, Jan Philip Schultz. Jan, images of total devastation there. What's the situation like in the city right now?
Marrakesh is in a state of shock. Last night you could still see some kind of normal everyday life. There were even some tourists outside in restaurants, but people are slowly starting to realize the extent of the tragedy. 1,000 people slept outside, either because their homes are damaged or because they are traumatized. Even here in the hotel where I stay, a lot of people prefer to sleep outside in the garden. And if you have a walk through the historic center just behind me, you see a lot of historic buildings destroyed. Fortunately, the death toll is not very high here in the city of Marrakesh, but it's a completely different picture, just 20, 30 kilometers outside of the city.
People clearly still worried about aftershocks. What's the latest in the remote areas worst affected by the earthquake?
Yes, people are very worried about aftershocks there. It's a horrible situation. The houses are completely destroyed in some villages, and people are still waiting for search and rescue teams to help them in their search for survivors. Thousands of people have been brought to local hospitals, but an unknown number of people is still trapped underneath the rubble. So a lot of people fear that the death toll is going to rise in the coming hours and days.
Jan, many countries have promised help. Are we beginning to see boots on the ground? And is aid reaching those that need it most?
When I arrived at Marrakesh airport yesterday, I saw some international teams coming in. The societies of the Red Crescent, Red Cross are still are already on the ground in many affected areas. Also, some smaller international NGOs are present. In general, the international reactions have been impressive. As we heard in the report, even Algeria, who cut off all ties with Morocco, is opening its airspace for humanitarian aid. But as we heard before, the villages are very, very difficult to reach. People are still waiting for help in many villages. So the search and rescue missions, they are in the process of being set up, but not all affected regions have been reached yet.
Clearly, the extent of damage and loss won't be known for days, if not weeks. Many thanks, DW correspondent Jan Philip Schultz.